Right now, across the United States, a heat wave is killing people and breaking records that have stood for over a century. In Billings, Montana, thermometers hit 111 degrees Fahrenheit on July 12th, the hottest temperature ever recorded there, beating a record that had stood since 1901. In Atlantic City, New Jersey, it hit 106 degrees on Independence Day. No Way Age has confirmed something even bigger. July 2026 was the hottest month the contiguous United States has ever recorded in its entire climate history. That's not a small distinction. It's the difference between a hot summer and a genuinely historic one. I'm Kinzo, and this channel exists for exactly this kind of story. Real data, real consequences, explained honestly, without exaggeration. If that's your kind of channel, stay with me, because this one gets more serious the deeper we go. Let's start with the timeline, because this heat wave didn't hit all at once. The first wave began on June 28th, settling over the eastern United States and eastern Canada. It held for a full week, breaking daily records across dozens of cities. Then, just as that first wave eased, a second heat dome formed, this time over the western half of the continent. By early August, heat advisories were active across the southwestern United States and into Alaska, a state most people don't associate with dangerous heat at all. Here's where the human cost becomes impossible to ignore. As of August 5th, health officials had attributed 70 deaths directly to this heat wave. The Washington Post, after independently reviewing medical examiner and coroner data across multiple states, reported that even that number likely understates the true toll because heat-related deaths are notoriously difficult to count accurately, and many go unrecorded in official statistics. In Colorado alone, extreme heat sent 72 people to the hospital in a single stretch in early August. The scale of this heat wave becomes clearer when you look at how many individual records fell within just a few weeks. Weather historians tracking daily station data across the United States documented dozens of all-time or monthly heat records broken between late June and early August. Some of these records had stood for over 120 years, since national weather record keeping first became standardized in the early 1900s. When a single summer breaks that many long-standing records simultaneously, meteorologists treat it as a genuinely significant climate signal, not simply an unusually hot season. This wasn't happening in some remote, disconnected region either. This heat wave arrived during the FIFA World Cup, during Independence Day celebrations, and during Canada Day, forcing outdoor events across two countries to add shade stations and emergency hydration points. Now, let's talk about why this particular heat wave is behaving so differently from a typical summer hot spell. A heat dome forms when a large area of high pressure traps hot air underneath it, like a lid on a pot, for days or even weeks at a time. That's not unusual on its own. What made this summer different is what's happening thousands of miles away in the Pacific Ocean. A Super El Niño is developing, and on August 13th, the U.S. Climate Prediction Center confirmed something significant. There is now a greater than 90% chance of a very strong El Niño event through the fall and winter of 2026 and 2027. Here's why that matters for the heat you're feeling right now. El Niño typically has a weaker, less predictable effect on summer weather compared to winter. But meteorologists tracking this year's pattern say something unusual is happening. Tropical Pacific convection has been strong enough to launch what scientists call Rossby waves directly into the mid-latitudes, the exact region where the United States and Canada sit. That's a technical way of describing something simple. Heat generated over the Pacific Ocean is being physically transported through atmospheric wave patterns directly into the path of North America's weather systems. To understand how unusual this is, it helps to look back at the two previous Super El Niño events on record, in 1997 and 1998, and again in 2015 and 2016. Both of those events were primarily associated with dramatic winter and spring impacts across North America, including major flooding in California and unusually mild winters across the northern United States and Canada. Neither of those previous Super El Niños produced this kind of pronounced summer heat signal before their peak had even arrived. That's precisely why meteorologists are paying closer attention this time, because the early summer warming, months before this, El Niño is even expected to reach full strength, doesn't match the historical pattern scientists have relied on for decades. Meteorologists analyzing this pattern describe it as unusually strong for a summer El Niño influence, layering on top of heat domes that would have already been dangerous on their own. Let's be completely clear about what scientists are and are not saying here. This heat wave is not solely caused by El Niño. Heat domes form through complex atmospheric conditions that happen most years, with or without El Niño present. What scientists are saying is that El Niño appears to be amplifying and extending patterns that were already forming, making an already dangerous summer measurably worse. NOAA's own confirmation that July 2026 was the hottest month in the contiguous United States' recorded climate history is not a prediction or a model. It's a direct measurement compared against every July since national record keeping began. It's also worth understanding why heat domes have become more intense in recent years generally. Climate scientists studying long-term temperature trends note that the jet stream, the fast-moving band of air that typically pushes weather systems along, has been showing more frequent periods of becoming stuck or wavy in recent decades. When the jet stream stalls, high-pressure systems like heat domes can sit over the same region for much longer than they historically would have. That stalling effect, combined with this year's unusually strong El Niño influence, is part of why forecasters describe this summer's pattern as layered, multiple reinforcing factors, rather than any single simple cause. Now here's the part of this story that genuinely worries meteorologists watching what comes next. That same Super El Niño pattern is now forecast to strengthen further heading into fall and winter. Severe Weather Europe's forecasting team, cross-referencing NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, and Canadian seasonal models, describes this El Niño's current trajectory as even stronger than the last major Super El Niño event on record. If that holds, the same atmospheric mechanism amplifying this summer's heat could reshape winter conditions across the United States and Canada in the months ahead, though the exact regional details remain harder to pin down than the overall warming signal. Let's talk about who's actually being hit hardest right now, because heat waves don't affect everyone equally. Emergency rooms across the hardest hit states have reported spikes in heat exhaustion and heat stroke cases, particularly among elderly residents, outdoor workers, and people without reliable access to air conditioning. Public health officials have specifically flagged homeless populations and low-income households as facing the highest risk during extended heat events like this one. Agricultural impacts are also becoming visible. In the United Kingdom, where a related but separate heat pattern has been affecting crops. The Met Office's own science lead on food security has publicly warned that the speed of the current climate pattern is outpacing farmers' ability to adapt. A warning increasingly echoed by agricultural officials across North America as well. Here's something that genuinely surprised even climate scientists tracking this event. Environment and climate change. Canada's climatologist David Phillips noted that warming Pacific waters tied to this El Niño pattern are already producing visible marine effects, including dolphin species being spotted off British Columbia's coast that aren't normally found in those waters. It's a small detail, but it's a real measurable sign of how far-reaching this ocean warming pattern actually is. The United Kingdom offers another useful comparison point, even though it sits on the opposite side of the Atlantic. In May of this year, the UK recorded its hottest May day ever measured, reaching 34.8 degrees Celsius at Kew Gardens, breaking a record that had stood since 1922. Wales set its own all-time May record the same week, reaching 32.2 degrees Celsius at Hawarden Airport, surpassing a record that had also stood since 1944. British meteorologists have separately confirmed a fourth distinct heat wave affecting the country this summer alongside worsening wildfire conditions across parts of England. Taken together, record heat on both sides of the Atlantic, arriving within months of each other, is exactly the kind of pattern that makes climate scientists compare notes across countries rather than treating each heat wave as an isolated local event. So what happens next, and how long does this actually last? Meteorologists are clear that this isn't a short-term event that simply ends when August does. The Climate Prediction Center's forecast confidence for a very strong El Niño through fall and winter suggests the atmospheric pattern driving this summer's heat will continue evolving, not disappear. Canadian federal forecasters have already flagged elevated odds of extreme weather extending into Quebec and other regions as this pattern strengthens further. Farmers across the central United States and Canadian prairies have also reported significant crop stress tied to this extended heat, echoing similar warnings from agricultural officials in the United Kingdom. Extended high temperatures combined with reduced soil moisture can measurably reduce yields for heat-sensitive crops like corn and wheat, according to agricultural extension services in several affected states. Officials have urged farmers to monitor irrigation needs closely, since crop losses tied to extreme heat often aren't fully visible until harvest season arrives. Let's be direct about the practical message here, because information without action is just anxiety. If you live anywhere currently under a heat advisory, particularly across the southwestern United States, Alaska, or the Canadian prairies, check your local National Weather Service or Environment Canada alerts daily, not just once. These advisories update as conditions shift, sometimes rapidly. If you have elderly family members, neighbors, or anyone without reliable air conditioning, checking in directly during active heat warnings has been shown to meaningfully reduce heat-related deaths, according to public health researchers who study these events. Stay hydrated, limit outdoor activity during peak afternoon hours, and take any heat advisory in your area seriously, even if the temperature doesn't feel unusual where you personally are standing. A few specific warning signs are worth knowing regardless of where you live. Heat exhaustion typically involves heavy sweating, dizziness, and nausea, and usually improves with rest, fluids, and moving somewhere cooler. Heat stroke is more serious, involving confusion, a rapid pulse, and skin that stops sweating entirely. and it requires immediate emergency medical attention. Public health agencies in both the United States and Canada recommend checking on elderly neighbors or relatives at least once daily during active heat advisories, since heat stroke can progress from mild symptoms to a medical emergency within a relatively short window of time. None of this requires panic. It requires the same thing every serious weather event requires: staying informed through official channels, checking in on people more vulnerable than you might be. Final thought. Heat waves have always been part of summer in North America. What's different about this one is the combination: a NOAA confirmed record hottest month, a death toll still being counted, and an ocean-driven pattern that forecasters say is only strengthening as we head toward fall and winter. Every record broken this summer, Billings is 111 degrees, Atlantic City's 106, becomes another data point scientists will study for years, trying to understand exactly how much of this was ordinary summer heat and how much was something genuinely new. We'll keep tracking this story as it develops. Every updated death toll, every fresh NOAA report, every shift in the winter forecast as this Super El Niño continues strengthening. I'm Kinzo, and if you want to understand what's actually happening to the weather around you, not just headlines, but the real data behind them, subscribe to Kinzo Explain. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel keep covering stories like this one, honestly. Drop a comment and tell me this: has this summer's heat felt unusual where you live? I read every single comment, and some of your stories directly shape which topics we cover next. Because right now, across 2 countries, people are adjusting their entire summer around a heat wave that scientists say isn't finished yet. See you in the next one.